Hello friends, this video will talk about oops in PHP. Not only that, I will be taking input from the user. This input will be validated with the help of JavaScript. The JavaScript will give a call to, why should I say, let me show you, isn't it? Let me first show you the output and then we'll come into the code part. Here you can see there are 3 folders. Let me click on the HTML and that brings us to a nice clean page. Well, over here a message that is coming, document is ready, and it's coming from script.js. So let me take you to script.js. Here it is, and this is a line that is getting displayed right over there, and this line is coming from where? Document.addEventListener. What event am I talking? Well, when the whole DOM content will be loaded on the browser. Yes, you rightly heard, an HTML is full of different DOM elements. So when all the DOM elements is completely loaded on the browser, then only this particular JavaScript will get executed automatically. So it will wait until all the DOM element does not get loaded in the browser. The very moment it does, then this particular function, whatever I have written over here, just like the statement console.log, this particular statement is what you can see right over here. So the very moment when the page got loaded, the DOM is visible, the DOM content loaded, this particular event listener gets fired, and hence you get to see this particular message. But within that there's also another important thing, and that is going to get fired if and only if the user clicks on the button. And where will I get the button? The button is present inside the HTML form tag. Don't worry, I will explore everything from the detail. And let's go and give an input. Okay, by the way, if I don't give input, what will happen? Well, in that case, I will get to see a message stating that you need to fill all the data. And where from it is coming? Well, it is coming again from JavaScript, and here is a line that you got to see a few minutes ago. All fields are required. But what if I give the input? Well, if you give the input, then there's something different. Let me give my name as input, and here is a last name, and let me give the email. I'm just choosing arbitrarily, and then what I will do is that I will click on the submit button, and as I do that, you will see some messages popping up on the console. Don't get worried about those things. I will show you what the relevant of those stuff. But at the same time, you will see a very clean looking table tag in front of you, where you will be seeing all the input that I have given is right over here. So the question is how this is working. Right, so let's start right from the HTML. Well, the very HTML has got the CDN link, and through which we are working on Bootstrap. Inside this HTML, I have got a form tag. And if you see over here, the form has an ID. Why? Because there can be multiple forms in the same HTML page. So for identification, ID is required. Apart from that, we have got different DOM elements like input type text, which has got both ID and name. Over here also we have got last name. Over here we have got email. So these are 3 DOM elements which has been uniquely identified by the respective ID and name. Apart from that, we also have got button, and the button is going to submit. What it will submit? Right, what it will submit? Well, it will submit the form, just like the way we say, we submit form at our college. In the same way we submit the form, right? So once the user has given the input and user click on the submit button, it is going to submit the form. And then what will happen? We'll see that, don't worry. Apart from that, there are a couple of div tags which are empty and they're outside the form. Okay, so they have been kept outside the form. And over here we have an external JavaScript that is linked with this particular file. So let's get and see what is there right after the HTML. As I said, first thing is that we are performing DOM content loaded. That means this particular JavaScript function will get immediately when the DOM is visible on the browser. When the DOM, all object of the DOM gets loaded successfully, then this particular function will get fired. Until then, it will wait. Now over here, as you can see, it has got one more form, and that form is the particular form which is right over here, within which I have given the input. So when the user is going to click on the submit button, at that point of time, this particular document or form, this is the name of the form that contains the button, and the button which the user will be clicking is the submit button. So when the user will click on the button, it will be submitting the form, and thereafter this particular event will get fired. Now over here, if you notice, this particular event gives a call to an anonymous function. Well, over here also it was giving a call to anonymous function. Anonymous function are those functions that does not have any name. They are just called by the keyword called function, or you can also call it like a callback function. Okay, they don't have any name, but this particular function has got a parameter called event, and the next line we are writing event.preventDefault. What does this mean? This means that when you are clicking on submit button, I don't want this particular refresh button to work, so it would prevent the page getting loaded, okay, or the page getting refresh. So that's the reason why event.preventDefault is the function that has been called, which will actually do not reload the page. Okay, now as I said that in the DOM element there is a form tag called user form. I need to identify that form because within that DOM all the other DOM elements are there, and for that reason what I'm doing is that I'm writing document.forms, and it has identified the form called user form, as we can see right over here, and I have created a reference by the name called form. You're free to choose whatever name you feel like, but over here I have given a call to the forms because there are multiple forms are there. They can be, right? So for that reason it's actually denoted by plural. Now inside this particular reference we have got all these DOM elements, so we can easily identify them with the help of third bracket, as if like this is an array and these are all items at the respective index. So this is like a 0th index, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. In this way they have been differentiated. So for that reason we are identifying each of the DOM element with the help of the ID. Well, you can make use of name as well, but we can work on ID as well. Okay, so both are flexible. But yes, if you are giving a call to document or get element by ID, at that point of ID will be more relevant. But over here we are working at the ID level, and dot value means the data that is given by the user on that particular text box that will be picked up, and in case if there is any blank space at the beginning of the end, that will be discarded. So that's how this particular reference will be having the value first name, last name, and email. And apart from that, over here we have got some div tag which are actually out of the form. So for that reason, in order to identify these DOM element, we will be using the function called document.getElement by ID, and the respective div tag lm name what I've given that I'm putting over here, and hence this particular reference got initialized. Now the first thing first is that I just want to check whether the input has been given in this particular DOM or not. So for that reason I'm saying if the input is not there, if the input is not there, if the input is not there, any one of this becoming true, then this particular message will be shown at this particular div tag result div. So we have just initialized this one result table, and over here we are just going to show this particular message, okay, that you need to fill all the data. So far so good, right? And in case if the user has already filled the data, now what? Well, we are going to create a new reference of the type FormData. So FormData is going to deal with the form, that means the HTML form that is going to hold the data. So with the help of FormData I can just pass on the data from the front end to the back end. Who is the back end over here? PHP is the back end. So that means FormData is going to hold the input that the user has actually given in the HTML page, and for that reason we are creating an object. So with the help of new keyword, we are basically creating an object, and let's consider this to be like a constructor name, because class name, constructor name are same as we have seen even in Java as well. So with the help of new keyword, and we're giving a call to the constructor, and the constructor is passing this particular form because the user has given input in this particular form only, right? So I'm creating a reference of the form type, and eventually I'm creating this reference by the name called FormData. Remember, all this input is actually present inside the FormData, right? I just wanted to use this variable just to check whether the input has been actually given or not, but we are passing over the object. So if you pass the object, inside this object you have got all the input that the user has given. So here I've created the reference, and now what I'm going to do is that I just came up with a console statement, and then I'm giving a call to a very wonderful function that is called fetch, which is very similar to that of AJAX in JavaScript, sorry, in jQuery. So inside the fetch, what I'm doing, I'm just telling which particular location you have to forward your data. So right now I'm inside the folder called JS, so I have to come out of that folder. That's the reason couple of dots are there. So you are coming out of JS and then you're going to PHP folder, and there you have a file called process.html. that word I want to process. So with the help of fetch function, you are giving a call to the backend. And not only that, you are also passing data from frontend to the backend. Since you are passing data, that means frontend is passing data to the backend, and you expect the backend to accept the data. For that reason, the method type is actually post. So post means when the frontend is sending data to the backend with the anticipation that the data will be stored in the database, the method type is actually post in that case, and the post data is always encrypted format. Okay. Now the question is, where is the data? So for that reason, we have an attribute called body, and inside the body we're passing this form data. So the whole thing that the user has given in this particular DOM element, everything is right now inside the body tag, and finally the data goes to the backend. So it's high time we can open the backend file now. Here is the backend. So data has actually been passed from JavaScript to PHP with the help of fetch function. Okay, now before we get into the PHP, I would like to add one more thing over here. Well, the fetch function actually returns promise. When you execute in the fetch, it returns a promise. That means it is promising that either it will give you a success or it will give an error. So something it will definitely give. So that's the promise. Just a second. Okay, so it did the promise, and now what? Well, you must remember, when the front is talking with the backend, it might take some time to do the connection, right? Or to get the data from the backend. So during this point of time, what it should do, what the front end should do? So the front end should keep on waiting until the data comes from backend, and then it will carry forward the work. Well, if it is going to happen that way, then it would be synchronous, but this is not so. And that's the reason why you are seeing a couple of messages over here. You are seeing the message number 1, and then message number 3, and then message number 2, just to make you understand that it is asynchronous in nature. So the time it would be taken by the backend to complete the work and send the work to the front end, meanwhile whatever pending work that is left, front end will do those things. So for that reason, by the time data comes from the backend to the front end, and the front end will be received by then, so whatever data that is going to send by PHP, that would be received by this response, and here we are passing an arrow function, as you can see over here, and this is going to be converted to JSON. So we are going to convert this. That means until the data comes from backend to the front end has an option rather not to wait but to carry on its work. So for that reason, the first console log you saw in the browser, the second console log would have shown you the data that is coming from the backend, but it would take time. Since it would take time and it is asynchronous in nature, that's the reason backend means whatever time it will be taken by backend to forward it to the front end, actually did not wait. It executed this particular line. That's the reason why you are seeing this particular line as a second statement over here. See, data from server is yet to process. Exactly, the data from server would take some time, maybe few seconds. So during this few seconds, you don't want to keep the user waiting. You want the user to be engaged with some activity, so that you don't you don't miss this particular flow. So for that reason, you want that let the continuation of the work continue until the data comes from the backend. So this line got fired, and after there is no further line, otherwise those lines should also get fired, and eventually when the data comes from the backend to the front end, it will resume right from the place where it left the work. So the control will get into the then part. So whatever backend data backend is sending, that is actually coming and getting stored inside this response parameter, and then it is going to convert that particular response into JSON, because initially it was in the form of PHP string. So you're converting the PHP string to the JSON format for further processing. And don't forget to create the return keyword, because here we have done chaining. So there is a then, and again this particular data, this return will be forwarded to this then, and here we have done some wonderful work. Let me tell you what the work is all about. So this particular return data will going to come and store inside this particular reference that is called user, and here also I've gone for the arrow function, And look over here. Here I have written this particular console statement. The reason since it took some time, for that reason this particular console statement came later on and is showing the data that is coming from the backend. That also it will be shown, but at first the first and the line number 3 got executed at first because it is asynchronous in nature, and since that reason it did not wait for the completion of the work. Let continue the work. When the data will come from the backend, at that point of time I will resume back my work. So that's how the asynchronous format is working over here, and that's the reason why it is called promise, because it has made a promise that it will accept some data either from the backend, or it will generate some error in case the backend creates some problem, but something is going to happen. So inside this, then what I'm going to do is that I'm checking whether there's any error or not. Well, there is no error. Had there been any error, then that error message would have been shown and the control will terminate thereafter. But since there is no error, so let's come inside the backtick. Remember, here we are writing an HTML code inside JavaScript. So inside JavaScript you directly cannot write HTML code, and for that reason you have gone for backtick. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to create a table like structure. As you can see right over here, a table structure is in front of you, right? So for that reason I'm giving a call to the HTML table tag, I'm giving a call to Bootstrap, I'm giving a call to heading. These are the headings that I have created, and finally I'm going for table row. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to provide the name of the respective DOM element. So over here, user, this is the user that is going to receive the data coming from the backend. So inside this we have got something called first name. So let's go and check the backend first, then it will be more easy for you to understand. So as you can see over here, at the very beginning I've written header content type : application / JSON. So that means the data that will come from the front end will be in the form of JSON. The data that will be going from the back end to the front end will also be in the form of JSON. So for that reason, this line indicates that there will be a communication between the front end and the back end with the help of JSON. So for that reason, it's a good practice to write down this particular header application / JSON. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a class in PHP. Right, so we are simply getting a class in PHP, and this class concept is same that of Java or that of Python, irrespective of whichever platform you're using. It is always a platform universal. So I have created a class by the name called user. Inside this class there are 3 properties are there, and these are public in nature. The access specifier is public. Now over here, if you have noticed, the variable name in PHP always start with a $sign. Why is that so? Because in other programming language we don't put any $sign at the beginning, but in case of PHP we have to figure out, we have to know that why this particular $sign is there. Well, this particular trend actually comes from Unix, and in Unix, when you are collecting data from a variable, you give the $sign before the variable name. So you can, and moreover, PHP was supposed to run at server level, so server are usually going to run Linux, so for that reason, or Unix, for that reason $sign has been there in context of variable name. Now we know that a class will going to hold a constructor, because with the help of constructor is going to allocate the resources, and at the same time with the help of constructor you're going to create instance. So here I've got parameters constructor, that means parameter in the form of first name, last name, email will come, and those parameters I'm going to assign to this class properties, and for that reason we are using this keyword. So this keyword actually indicates the current object who is responsible for performing all this operation. Well, I know you must be wondering, where is my object? Don't worry, I will be showing you. So that's how the initialization has taken place. So the data is coming from the outside world, is been assigned to this parameter with the help of this object, and eventually this parameter passes the data with the help of this keyword. We're just holding this data right now, and then we'll do the further processing. Well, over here I have got one function called create array. So we need to give a call to this particular function, right? Create array, and then it will do this work. Well, how is that exactly this particular function is going to work? I will show you. Now, apart from these 2 things, the class ends, and then we have got some basic functions. Since the data is coming from JavaScript in the form of post, look over here, I have mentioned very clearly the data will be in the form of a post. The method type is post. So for that reason, in PHP I'm checking if the server is receiving data in the form of post. If it is true, yes, in this case the server is going to receive the data in the form of post. It is true. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up the data that are there inside this form data. Remember, this form data is going to have the first name, last name, and email. This particular 3 things it has got. I knew it very well. In fact, That's what we are doing over here. So we are going to identify the respective DOM elements. So over here I have already created this DOM, and now what we are going to do is that we are going to use this DOM. So this is a very important part of the story, that you have to use this DOM, right? So for that reason I'm giving a call to first name, last name and email, first name, last name and email $post. So it is going to come from the I mean to say the front end is going to submit the data, and those data will hold these keys, right? So that means the JavaScript is going to pass on this particular form data, and inside this data we will be having those keys, right? Okay, great. And first name, last name and email, these are the DOM elements where from the data will actually be collected. So $_post is responsible for collecting data from the front end, and in case if there is no value, in that case we'll assign the blank value. So it's always a good practice to keep both the condition hands on. Okay, so if everything goes well, then $post will provide the first name, $post will provide the last name, and $email will provide the email ID. Great. So far we have got these data right now in PHP, which was initially been generated by HTML. So now I'm just going to check whether the first name, last name, email is actually there or not, and that this time we are using the empty. We did the same thing in case JavaScript also, right? It's a good practice that you always go and check whether the data is actually there or not. Well, if the data is not there, now PHP has to send a response back to JavaScript and then to HTML, and that will be done how? So what we are going to do over here is that we are going to give a call to JSON encode. That means the PHP is going to convert the raw string into a JSON format, and JSON will always have a key value pair. So this is my key and this is the value. Remember, when you are sending data from the backend to the front end, it is always in the form of JSON, and JSON will always have a key and the key will always have a value. So for that reason, JSON_encode is responsible for converting this. So because of this particular data will then come, since we are going for an error. This is all happening when it is an error, right? When it is an error. So in that case, this particular information will come and will get stored inside the error handling part, right? And over here, who is going to receive this data? This data is going to be received by, as we saw just now. So over here, if there is any error, this has to be forwarded back, and that will actually come and get stored inside the fetch, inside the response. So from here the thing will actually turn up, right? And this is where the thing is actually going to happen. So we are just checking whether there's any error or not. See user.error, we just now saw if there's any error. If there's any error, so we have created this, and here we're writing the error. So if this key does match with user.error, in that case that information which you are passing inside this user.error, and that's the reason over here we have done the string interpolation. That means we're actually picking up the data from the object, and that's what we are doing it. So if this particular key does match, so this particular message will be shown at the front end, which we already seen when the user did not give any input. So remember, since the operation is happening at the PHP, that you used to have to give back the data to the front end. So for that reason, always good practice that you convert your PHP data into JSON format, and for that reason you are using JSON_encode. And since it was a black, there was no data, it was completely black, so I made use of exit. So exit means you are going out of the program. Okay, but you will not need to do this in case the data is all valid. So in that case, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create an object, and there where the class comes in picture. So the the information which you have given, those information was the first name, last name and email on the respective variables. I'm now passing it to my constructor, and this constructor is going to create one object, and that object I'm going to store inside this $user. So new keyword is responsible for creating an object, and that object we are going to assign somewhere, and in this case we have assigned it in $user. Now what I'm going to do? Well, now we have to give a call to this particular method. Why? Because I have to send the data that was given by the user. So when you're sending the data from the backend to the front end, what is a good practice? Well, you create an associative array. So this particular function is responsible for creating one array that has got one row with multiple columns. And that's what you are seeing right now over here. You are seeing one row with multiple columns, and this is all happened with the help of this particular function called create array. So over here you can see we are creating a key, and this arrow operator indicates that this is an associative array. So there's an association between key and value, and eventually you're creating this particular array, and that array you are forwarding, and that array is getting stored under the variable called $user_array. And now I have to send this particular array to my front end. Remember, this is a PHP reference, so I have to convert it into an object of type JavaScript so that my JavaScript can work on it. And for that reason, we are performing JSON_encode, so to convert the PHP raw code into a JSON format and forward this data to the front end. So when you're forwarding this particular data to the front end, it is again the fetch function who is going to receive this. We are going to receive this, right? So we can do one thing. We can have multiple objects, right? But before we get to multiple objects, at first you need to have a single object, and that object you are already passing over here. So when you have created this and then you are putting this inside this array, that means this array holds the key value pair, whatever input you have given, and that's what we are going to forward. And this particular data that you are forwarding is finally going to be stored within let me hold on, within this particular then block, within the response. Okay, so first thing now response has to do is that it has to convert the PHP object reference into JSON compatible format, and for that reason we are giving a call to response.json. So here we are converting your data into JSON format, and then we are forwarding, and that data will now finally come to the to this particular then block. So here the return keyword, the object is actually coming to the user. And now again I'm checking whether there's any data or not, if there's any error or not. Well, if there's no data, now we are going to formulate our HTML table. And since we are going to write the table tag inside the JavaScript, for that reason we are using backtick operator. So backtick is used when you're writing HTML inside JavaScript, and here we are creating table. We are creating a bootstrap table styling, we are creating a table heading, and this is a table cell, first name, last name, email, and the respective data is inside this user. So I'm just going to extract those particular keys which we have mentioned over here. So key name was there, no, first name, last name, we have already mentioned those keys, first name, last name we have mentioned, right? So those keys I need to extract, and that's what we are extracting right over here. So we are extracting that inside this user there will be first name, pick up that first name, show that first name, like what you can see over here, pick up the last name and pick up the email ID, and finally that what is getting rendered. But it will not happen over here right now because this thing I have to forward it to my HTML. So over here this whole operation has been done, and this thing will be dumped inside the div tag with the help of the property called inner HTML, and the form get reset. That means whatever input I have given the form, everything get clear off. So finally this particular value will now forward it to whom? Forward it to my HTML, because I have to render this. And for that reason what we have done over here, we have highlighted this particular div tag, right? We have result table. So this result table is the div tag where the data will be now dumped into. So you're going to return this data, so this data will be returned back, and after returning there is no error right now, so the data will come back to my front end, and right over here the data will get stored, and eventually we will be able to see this particular table. Okay, that's great, right? But before we wrap up, one more time I would like to tell you that the beauty of fetch function, the fetch function is going to work in the form of, like, you're first accessing the URL and you're passing the data. And since this is going to take some time, so for that reason what they have done, well, they have created different then blocks. So whichever then block will be getting executed, it's fine, that particular block will get executed. So initially the data will be in the form of Python that will come to the front end. The front end will convert the data into JSON format, and that has been done by the first then block. And then finally you forward the data to the next then block so that it does the HTML implementation inside the JavaScript so that it can render the data, and that is what happening right now. And in case if there was any kind of issue, then that issue will be accepted by the error. So error will be generated, and what error it is generating, that will be shown right over here. Okay, so that's how we have understood how the flow of data taking place from HTML to JavaScript passing data to the array, and finally array creating the object, that object get back to the JavaScript, and finally JavaScript is coming to the HTML. So that's how the complete ecosystem works. So over here I showed you how the interaction, how the basic class representation is there, what is constructor, what is the class properties. So this thing I've already explained. Now it is a high time that you give a look on this particular code and become a very good master over PHP. Okay, so that's all from this video presentation. See you soon. Bye bye.